friends, Jewel back with more super cool astrology videos. And I wanted to talk today about the inconjunction between Jupiter and Neptune. What happens when we see this in the birth chart? So Neptune is our good, Jupiter. Ooh, got me already. Jupiter is our good judgment. It is our sense of what is right and wrong. So when we're talking about, black or white, that's the things of Jupiter. It is our higher ideas. So it is the judgments that form from our opinions at the Mercury level. That's why we find Jupiter opposing Mercury, the natural, on the natural wheel in astrology. So, our perceptions come in from through Mercury, and they go up to become the things of Jupiter. And so Jupiter is laws, publishing, learning. Our teachers, our gurus, our ability to recognize the larger patterns in our lives. Mercury is small patterns. And growth, learning, abundance, foreign things, advice. And so when we have that in conjunction with Neptune, which is about boundless things and about everything's okay at once, and we want to experience all things at once, and illusion, things that are, not readily seen, mysteries, lies, deception, things that seem real but they actually aren't, illusion. So when we have these two in an inconjunct aspect, there's really absolutely no balance between these two planets. And this very, very much comes out as having our judgments be far from correct. And things very much related to Jupiter are what we see as the real problem with this. So people that have this one really are under the impression, they tell themselves an unconscious story that they owe something to the world, or they owe something to other people. They don't know that they're thinking that, but they're definitely acting out that way of being. They feel, like, they are a slave. And so what's really happening is they have this unconscious self-persecution complex going on. And it stems from this tremendous guilt that comes from not taking responsibility and really at an early age disassociating from their higher ideas or their judgments or their idea of right and wrong. They gave that over to somebody else and said, well, it's safer to let somebody else decide that and tell me what those things are. And so it was a very early survival thing that we adopted, survival characteristics, as all of our characteristics are. And so what happens is they go along and they get a little older and they find ways to create situations in which they are attracting other people who are willing to enslave them, who are willing to take advantage of them, who are willing to put the screws to them. And it somehow puts them in this position where they are enslaved to this other person's ideas, enslaved to this other person's judgments. And so what they're really, really trying to do is they're trying to avoid judgment, ultimately. And that is why they don't make judgments. They let other people make that for them. And they abstain from that. That's terrifying. To be judged, so they don't judge. And what happens is they find situations in their lives. These are not accidental situations. These are situations that are there to teach this person what they wanted to know. That's why they chose this. They are needing to experience how they are extorted from, persecuted, things are taken, too much is put on them, too much is expected of them. A lot of times they are extremely religious, or they, many times people with this particular inconjunction can think that they are Jesus, or they are extremely enlightened, or a guru, or a spiritual master of some kind. And if you really dig deep, it's not their philosophy that they're preaching or they're believing. It's some higher authority that they can pin their ideas and their judgments on. So they need others' dependence on them. They don't get this. They think they're dependent, and they actually are. They are. Don't get me wrong. They are behaving in dependent ways, but they need dependence on them. So this one shows up as, very selfless, but it's not. When you look really deeply, it's a very vain and selfish thing that they're actually trying to unconsciously do through the mode of giving or, enslaving others to us by being a slave to them. So those that they put in Jupiterian roles, teachers, husbands, lawyers, mentors, sometimes a boyfriend that we think knows more than us, psychics, astrologers, people that they think know more than them, they depend on them. And what this does over time is it has this way of creating a dependence from the person that they think they're dependent on. So somehow they create a scenario where a teacher becomes dependent on them or a boyfriend becomes dependent on them. And it's not going to be something like, oh, can you help me do this? It's usually a persecutory kind of dependence going on here, where something is being taken from them. So it's like, they want to end this, but they can't because this other person is forcing this kind of thing upon them. So that what they create is these impossible to solve problems, or impossible to find a way out of situations, because it gives them the unconscious reason to stay in this type of relationship where they don't have to take responsibility for their judgments, and they don't have to take responsibility for their boundaries. They will find a way to have the other person be that one who's crossing their boundaries. And it's something where getting them to understand that this is a problem with their own boundaries. They don't get that. They don't understand how others could be motivated to take advantage of them. It is a mystery to them. They will sit and think, I just can't believe it. How could this person do this to me? Me, I never thought this person could ever cross this boundary or do this. And you hear this a lot from people who have this in conjunction. And Neptune, is that force within us that is about, giving, and about, not asking for anything in return. And Jupiter is our good judgment. So in their mind, they cannot understand why somebody would want to take something for them or do this to them when they are such a nice person. They are giving. They have done everything they wanted. And they're still doing this. Well, they're doing it because you make it so easy. You make it easy. You have to develop a boundary. You have to learn to say no. You have to learn to take responsibility for saying no. And then this problem gets solved. So it's a really big issue for people who have this inconjunction to believe what they are told. And I see a lot of people in my practice that have this particular inconjunction, and we do a lot of talking about how we need to get them to a place to where they don't need to call me anymore. They don't need my advice because they are taking responsibility for being their own advisor or their own counselor. But it's very important somebody is building up their sense of own boundaries related to their own judgments, that they have good advice. People with this inconjunction attract bad advice. They attract bad advisors, they attract bad teachers, they attract bad psychics. I cannot tell you how many women that I have seen with this inconjunction, or with a few other key aspects, that come to my practice, and it's the same story. I went to a past life astrologer or a past life regressionist, and they told me that I was a prostitute in my last life and that I killed somebody, and that's why I'm experiencing this or this or this. I have heard this exact same story dozens and dozens of times. I can tell you that there are not this many women running around the planet who are murdering past prostitutes. It is ludicrous, but they totally buy it, hook, line, and sinker. And they call me because they're freaked out. And I do a lot of cleanup work. I do a lot of cleanup work from Vedic astrologers too, that tell women really horrifying things. So it's one where you've got to really have a stop sign here. That when something doesn't feel right to you, or it makes you scared, or it stimulates your paranoia, that's when you know that this inconjunction has been triggered. And that's when you need to stand back and say, whoa, does this make sense to me? Is this what I think, or is this what I'm being told? And are they asking me to make another appointment? Now they're wanting me to buy their $500 worth of healing DVDs, and oh my gosh. So now they feel like they're being extorted from. Now they feel like they have to buy all of this because the teacher's telling them, and if they don't, then something's going to go wrong, or they're going to be judged by that teacher. And so, it creates this dilemma. You fix it by, I feel kind of funny, or I feel pressured, or I feel like I don't feel good. And I feel like that because a boundary of mine has been crossed. What boundary is that? Oh, it's probably related to the fact that I know that I'm not a murdering prostitute. So you've got to come to your senses when you have this inconjunction. Because if you do not use and exercise your good judgment that you must learn, because it's not natural within you. And it's not supposed to be. This is something that you are learning. And it will become a strength as you do. So, when we can come to learn to accept our own judgments, instead of listening to the advice of others, usually bad advice, then we get to a place where we're no longer being blackmailed. We're no longer having things put upon us by coworkers at work that we don't even have responsibility to do, but somehow we're doing it anyway. We're not having people treat us in ways that are frankly rude or dismissive. And it puts us in a place where we can finally find some real abundance in our life. Because Jupiter is our abundance. Neptune is our guilt. And so we tend to give away our abundance because we feel guilty. You got to get off that damn guilt train. And you got to get some sense about you. And figure out that you are extremely smart. You don't need an advisor. You don't even need me. You need to get with your boundaries. And that means you need to figure out what the hell that is. And you need to get real about what you really think. Take responsibility for that. Then you're not in a position where now you're in this unsolvable problem because this other person has told you this and you feel like, well, it might be this and no, I better go with that, and it's exhausting. So a lot of people who have some real perception problems with reality have this in conjunction. Homeless people, a lot of them have this particular in conjunction, or other hard aspects to Neptune or Jupiter. Usually it's the in conjunction. People who struggle with schizophrenia often have this particular in conjunction. Because it represents a certain amount of pattern recognition problems, which especially paranoid schizophrenia is a product of. Also Mercury, hard Jupiter aspects, especially the in conjunction, and Moon in conjunct to Jupiter. If we have Moon in a difficult sign and we have the right aspects involved, and the Moon ruling the fourth, perhaps it's puts us in a position where we can see some homelessness mixed with some amount of paranoia. Jupiter represents, our idea of teachers, our government system, along with the Sun and Saturn. So a lot of times we can see people that have like a government paranoia or a gang stalking paranoia, someone who thinks that they are God or is being persecuted by the devil or the government. Very, very often we'll see this type of aspect. So it's often a very deeply ingrained issue with abdicating from our responsibility for what our judgment is. And you can't penetrate this in conjunction very well. People who have it are telling themselves such a complete circuit of a story, because we all tell ourselves stories, and the different connections between our different planets tell. What kind of stories do we tell? Well, this one is a doozy. This one is very, very difficult to break through or to make somebody understand is not really occurring. It's a perception problem. It is a pattern recognition problem. And many, many times, that's what is at the base of this, is that they do not recognize, even people who don't struggle with out and out mental illness or symptoms of schizophrenia, that this, at the basis of this in conjunction for everybody, is a pattern recognition problem. So we have to see, how is it that we have been misled, and make those connections. Oh, there's a pattern here. The pattern is that every time I've listened to somebody else, or I've done what this person says, and we're talking about bad advisors, there is such a thing of attracting good advisors into your life. And you do that after you've started to handle this after a certain amount of time, and you realize that maybe I've gotten some bad advice here, instead of just going with it. See, that shows a certain amount of growing out of it, attracting a good advisor, because you're starting to think. So it's one where, ultimately, we have a really hard time with pattern recognition, and a hard time with keeping money, because time and money slip away with this particular in conjunction. And mental illness, and specifically schizophrenia, is also associated with, and I see this a lot in my practice, it is a time delay problem, or a timing recognition problem as well. So it's a very complex in conjunction to have, and on any level it's going to bring a certain amount of worry or paranoia, and we get out of that by learning to trust what we think is right or wrong. We don't put that on somebody else. We don't get that from somebody else. Jupiter is our philosophy. It's our religion. It's our high ideals. And you have to get to a point where you know what those are for you. You're not adopting that from somebody else because that's safe. That isn't even you. That's somebody else's ideas. That's somebody else's philosophy. You're teaching somebody else. So learn to say no. Get some boundaries about you. This is actually a very brilliant inconjunction to have if you can get to a point where you understand what's going on. Because it creates this easy psychic flow, meaning that we can feel and interpret Neptune from our environment and come up with a judgment about what that is. So we get to a place where if you can learn to get clear about what your judgments are and about what you think and about your boundaries, you can become a supreme psychic or intuitive with this particular aspect. But you have to make it real. I always say that with Neptune, you've got to make it real. We've got to get through the illusion of Neptune in order to make it something that works for us in this dimension. So it's definitely a difficult aspect to have. It is one that can lend some amazing talents if you can get to that point where you know what your judgments are. Then, when you interpret, when you feel, when that Neptune happens, you know, this is what it is, and you can speak it because you trust your judgment. You trust that what you feel is what you know. So I hope that this was helpful. If it was, please subscribe to me. You can find me on YouTube at YouTube. Mercury is making its inferior conjunction to the sun today. It's in retrograde, and it's been killing me. Oh, I'm ruled by Mercury because I'm Virgo ascendant, so I get it. I need to slow down. I need to turn in. I need to spend less time working and more time meditating, and then he'll leave me alone. So you can find me on Facebook at Truth in Aspect Astrology, and you can find me on the internet at truthinaspectastrology.com. I'll be back super soon. Yes, I do private consultation, and I will see you later.